Hi, my name is Taylor Huffman, and this is case study number 1 for Counseling 487 Professional and Ethical Issues in Counseling. For this assignment, I have chosen the case study of parental notification policies and student pregnancies. This case study came about when an angry parent challenged a school district because the counselor did not inform her that her daughter was pregnant and seeking guidance from the school counselor. The district then put a new policy in place that would require the counselor to encourage the student to tell their parent or guardian that they were pregnant. If the child did not tell their parent within a certain timeline, the counselor then was responsible for informing the parent about the pregnancy. There are several legal and ethical issues to consider when thinking about this particular case study. The first issue that I wanted to discuss was the unpredictability of parent reaction. Some parents could be very supportive and the reaction could be beneficial. However, other parents could be very coercive or abusive, and that could potentially hurt the relationship that the student and counselor had. Next, the student may hold valid fears, such as rejection, disappointing their parents or guardians, fear of violence in the home or being forced to leave the home, wanting to spare their parents or guardians from a problem, wanting to handle it on their own, or the fear that their parents or guardians will force them to have an abortion. As stated briefly before, policies can reduce the counselor's role by harming relationships between the counselor and student. If the student is already in a highly vulnerable state at home, these policies really eliminate the counselor's capacity to help students weigh the facts, grapple with the issues, and determine when, how, or whether to involve the parents or guardians. We will discuss the violation of the student's federal and state rights a little bit later when we dive into a couple of court cases. But overall, these one-size-fits-all district policies really deter students from seeking assistance from school-based resources, whether medically or mentally. In March of 2017, Dr. Carolyn Stone, the author of one of our course textbooks, School Counseling Principles, Ethics, and Law, conducted a survey of 749 American School Counseling Association members to discuss various policies within their districts. The following slides will show some of the major findings of this survey. The first question of the survey discussed whether or not the students predicted correctly the parental reaction when bringing up their pregnancy. 52.7% of students had accurately predicted how their parents would react, while the other 47.3% did not. The next question represented how closely the counselor was working with the student to involve her parents. 48.4% of the counselors responded that they do not inform the parents, but always work diligently to get the student to inform the parents themselves. 21.9% of the counselors will sometimes make the decision to inform the parent or guardian if the child does not. 11.4% of counselors will let the student take the lead as to whether she wants her parents to know or not. 0.2% have never informed the parents about a student's pregnancy under any circumstances, and 16.3% of the counselors have never worked with a student regarding a pregnancy. The final 3 questions of the survey focused strictly on the district policies themselves. 6.5% of districts said that they had a written policy in place that required counselors to contact parents. 81.9% said that their district had no policy, and 11.6% said that there was no written policy, but it is a verbal agreement that the expectation is to inform parents when a student is pregnant. Counselors were also asked if their policy allows for any exceptions in which not all situations require a parental or guardian notification about a pregnancy. 8.4% of counselors said yes, they do allow exceptions, where 10.3% said their policies do not allow exceptions, and 81.4% of counselors say that there is no application because they do not have a policy. Finally, school counselors were asked, in their own opinion, should all school districts have policies requiring school counselors to call parents or guardians if a student reports being pregnant. 27.7% of the survey takers replied yes, where 72.3% of the survey takers replied no. Now I want to turn the focus of the presentation to how these policies can be seen as a violation of rights to students. We can do that by starting with the first court case of Port Washington Teachers Association versus the Board of Education of Port Washington Union Free School District in 2005. In 2002, the Port Washington School District in New York enacted a written policy requiring educators to inform parents of a student's pregnancy. In 2005, the district's Teachers Association failed in court to get an injunction to stop the implementation of the policy. This brings us to our next court case of Bellotti, the Massachusetts Attorney General, versus Baird, who was an abortion rights clinic director. Massachusetts was passing a state statute that required a pregnant minor to consult her parents and, in most cases, obtain their consent before getting an abortion. In district court, Baird received an injunction that blocked the statute from coming into effect, and then Attorney General Bellotti appealed. After the appeal, the district court still thought that the statute was against constitutional rights of the child. When reflecting on this particular case study, I was asked, do you foresee this type of ethical, legal issue happening in your future career as a counselor? And I would have to answer absolutely yes. I am in my first year as a high school counselor, and earlier this year I met with a freshman who thought that she might be pregnant. With this experience, the school nurse and I worked together to talk with the student, review some of the symptoms that she was experiencing. We had many conversations with this student to make sure that she was telling her grandmother about her situation, but we did not ourselves reach out to grandma. That was a very new experience for the both of us, and after reading this case study and researching a little more, I am feeling more comfort about the decision that we made as a team and the fact that we kept the student's confidentiality but encouraged her to still have that conversation with her guardian. In reading the textbook, there were not any particular strategies that stood out or were necessarily recommended. It seemed more of a case study that was strong in advocacy for districts not creating these types of policies to protect the students. I think advocating for these students to have their own voice in these situations is huge because we don't always know the home life that the student may have. And when we go and break that confidentiality and tell the parents for them, maybe putting them in a position where they are not going to receive adequate support for the situation. If I were to handle another experience like this, I think that I would continue consulting our school nurse because this is a health related matter. But if the student is also receiving school based mental health services, I would also reach out to their therapist and or caseworker so that we can continue working together as a team to help this student. Some barriers that I could see when consulting with individuals about this is the religion aspect. If a student is wanting an abortion because they think that's best, but the community is anti-abortion or very heavy in religion, I think that that could definitely stand between my job as a counselor and helping that student problem solve what genuinely is the best option for them. Some discussion questions that I thought about while working on this case study that I would encourage future counselors to think about is, what is your opinion on a one-size-fits-all district policy for students who may be pregnant that come to you as a counselor for guidance? When working with something like this, it's important to put aside your own beliefs and truly think about the student and what would be the safest option for them. Which brings me to question number 2. In a situation where the parent or guardian is not supportive of the child's decision, whether it is to get an abortion or look into other options? What steps can you take as a counselor to help support the student without overstepping any boundaries? Finally, how can you advocate for the students in your district if there is a discussion of a concrete policy being formed? I am fortunate enough to be in a district that does not have a policy. So when I was faced with a situation similar to the case study, I was able to use my best judgment and consult with other professionals and supervisors to help make the best decision for that student and make sure that she was safe and taken care of. And that concludes my presentation of school district policies and students who are pregnant. Thank you so much for taking time to watch this and listen, and hopefully I helped open your eyes to some new policies and ways that you can advocate for your students.